Deep beneath the Colosseum, Keanu Reeves brushed his hand against a cold stone wall and felt it move. A hidden door opened where no record said it existed. Inside waited a darkness filled with impossible symbols and a warning written 2,000 years ago. What he found down those steps would change history forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Night settled over Rome with a soft hush, wrapping the ancient city in a calm that only history could produce. Keanu Reeves walked beside Dr. Livia Caruso through a dimly lit corridor deep inside the Colosseum where the public was never allowed after sunset. He preferred these hours when the crowds disappeared and the monument breathed in its old rhythm again. Each step echoed against stone, worn by centuries of footsteps carrying the weight of empires long gone. Keanu placed a hand along the curved wall and felt the familiar chill of history. The texture grounded him. It made him feel small in a way he found comforting. Livia moved with quick confidence, her dark ponytail swaying with each step. She explained that she had been granted special permission to show him recent excavation zones areas still under study and not yet on any official maps. Her voice carried the soft enthusiasm of someone who loved her work more than anything. Keanu listened quietly, absorbing every detail as she described tunnels, storage rooms, and cells that once held animals for the gladiator shows. He admired her knowledge and the reverence she carried for every stone in the building. A soft breeze drifted through the corridor even though they were deep inside the structure. Keanu paused. Something about the temperature felt wrong. The walls here should have been uniformly cold, yet one section felt strangely different. He stepped away from Livia's light and angled his own flashlight toward a shadowed corner. A thin crack ran vertically down one block, almost invisible unless the beam hit it the right way. It was too straight to be natural, too precise. The surface around it felt smoother than the surrounding stone, as if untouched by time. He raised his fingers and pressed gently against the groove. The cold jumped through his fingertips sharper and more focused than the rest of the wall. It almost felt metallic beneath the thin layer of dust. Livia continued speaking until she noticed Keanu had fallen behind. She turned, lifting her flashlight toward him, and saw the expression on his face shift from curiosity to quiet focus. He whispered that something was strange here. Before she could respond, the entire stone slab trembled under his hand. A vibration traveled through the floor, subtle but unmistakable. Keanu stepped back as the block shifted inward with a grinding moan. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Livia froze as her flashlight flickered. The slab continued to sink, revealing the outline of a door where no records indicated an entrance ever existed. The mechanism inside the wall awakened with a sound that did not belong to ancient Rome. The sound that emerged from inside the wall was unlike anything Keanu or Livia had heard in the Colosseum before. It was not the crumble of weakened stone or the scrape of shifting earth. It was controlled, mechanical, almost deliberate. As the last fragments of dust settled, a narrow, vertical opening appeared before them. The slab had folded back just enough to reveal a passageway carved into darkness. Livia's breath caught as she stared at the gap. The maps she carried showed nothing in this section. No chambers, no crawl spaces, no maintenance tunnels. The look on her face shifted from confusion to fear. Keanu leaned in slightly, shining his flashlight into the void. The beam disappeared almost instantly, swallowed by a blackness thicker than shadow. He felt a rush of cold air sweep across his face, as though the passage had been sealed for centuries and was exhaling its first breath. The temperature drop raised goosebumps along his arms. He lowered the light and brushed his fingers along the revealed edge of the doorway. The surface inside felt smoother than the outside wall, more polished, almost unnatural for a structure built 2,000 years ago. Livia moved closer and placed a hesitant hand on Keanu's arm. Her voice shook softly as she said that this could not possibly be Roman. She had spent years studying every corner of the Colosseum. Nothing in archaeological records mentioned hidden engineering of this kind. Keanu listened quietly, scanning the space with calm attention, though the weight of the moment pressed hard against his chest. Something about the cold, the silence, and the precision of the opening stirred an instinct deep within him. It felt as if the doorway had been waiting for someone, waiting for a moment when the world was quiet enough to notice it. The grinding stopped. A stillness settled around them that felt almost too heavy for the air. Keanu stepped closer again, shining the flashlight downward. He could see the faint beginning of stairs cut perfectly into the stone. They descended at a gentle angle, narrowing into the depths. The edges were sharp, the steps were smooth, no signs of erosion, no chisel marks, no Roman style. It was precise in a way that did not match any known ancient architecture. Livia's fear began turning into awe. She whispered that this might be the discovery of the century if it was real. Keanu remained still, staring down the impossible staircase. He felt a strange pressure in the air around him, like the atmosphere was pushing forward, calling him. The darkness beyond the opening pulsed as though alive. Something waited below, something old, something hidden for a reason. Keanu steadied his breath as he lifted the flashlight higher, letting the beam stretch deeper down the newly exposed stairway. The light barely reached the bottom, swallowed by an unnatural darkness that felt heavier than air. It was as though the shadows had density, a quiet weight that pressed against the edges of the corridor. He took a single step closer, trying to understand why the space felt so different from the rest of the Colosseum. The structure should have been rough and ancient, yet the angles inside were precise and untouched. It was as if time had been kept out. Livia stood behind him, gripping her flashlight tightly. She asked if they should call security or notify the excavation team, but her voice broke midway. She knew instinctively that this discovery fell outside anything a normal team would be prepared for. Keanu did not answer immediately. He continued to observe the entrance, trying to sense whether it felt dangerous or simply unknown. The cold air rising from below brushed across his face, again sharper this time. It carried no smell, no trace of dust or decay, only a sterile stillness. He angled the flashlight to the left, then to the right. The stairway walls were carved perfectly smooth. No tool marks, no cracks, no weathering. The craftsmanship belonged to no ancient culture he had ever studied. He felt something pulse beneath his fingertips as he braced the doorway. A vibration faint enough to question whether it was real, yet persistent enough to send a quiet warning through his chest. Livia whispered that they should step back. Keanu did not move. He sensed that whatever lay down those steps was not simply hidden. It was waiting. He raised the flashlight one more time and faced the darkness fully. The air seemed to breathe back. Keanu stood at the threshold, watching the cold air rise from the opening like a faint mist. The temperature felt unnatural for an underground space. It was too sharp, too focused, almost deliberate in the way it wrapped around his skin. Livia hovered behind him, clutching her flashlight with both hands as she flipped through the laminated architectural maps she carried everywhere. She compared the drawings quickly, moving from page to page with growing confusion. Her voice cracked when she admitted that nothing in the documented layouts resembled this entrance. Every known tunnel chamber or maintenance corridor had been carefully cataloged. This one had no place in any official record. Keanu took one more breath before placing his foot on the first step. The moment his shoe touched the stone, the cold shifted. It softened around him, warming in a slow wave that climbed up his leg and across his chest. He paused and stepped back. The cold returned instantly. He stepped forward again. The warmth rushed to meet him. Livia's eyes widened at the realization that the temperature was responding to movement. It felt engineered, as if designed to maintain stability inside the passage. She whispered that nothing built by the Romans had ever demonstrated temperature regulation like this. He began descending the steps with slow, cautious strides, keeping his flashlight fixed ahead. Livia followed, though her steps trembled with nerves. The stairway continued far deeper than any part of the Colosseum should have reached. The height of the ancient arena did not allow for this much vertical descent. The more they walked, the stranger the craftsmanship became. Thin metal rods appeared embedded along the walls at regular intervals. The rods were perfectly aligned from top to bottom, as though placed by someone with access to advanced tools and precise measurements. They did not show rust. They did not show decay. They looked as if they had been installed only days earlier, even though the dust coating them hinted at centuries of abandonment. Keanu brushed his fingers against one of the rods, feeling a faint vibration move through the metal. Livia stared at it with a mixture of awe and fear. She whispered that the Romans had nothing capable of producing metal like this, especially not with such purity or consistency. Her voice softened into a fragile confession that if this passage was authentic, it could rewrite everything they understood about ancient Roman engineering. She struggled to imagine what purpose this place could have served. Keanu continued downward, sensing that every step brought them closer to something their world was never meant to find. The deeper they descended, the more the atmosphere shifted from archaeological curiosity to something closer to entering another realm. The stone beneath their feet gradually changed in texture. The rough, grainy surface that defined most of the Colosseum's underground levels slowly gave way to a polished finish. By the 10th or 12th step, the walls gleamed under their flashlights with a smoothness that looked almost like glass. Keanu paused again and pressed his fingertips against the stone. The surface felt warm, far warmer than the air around them. It gave the impression of something alive, something deliberately crafted to endure ages without breaking down. Livia stepped beside him, shining her light along the curved passage. Her breath shook as she took in the reflective walls, the symmetry and the calculated precision in every angle. She had spent her entire academic life studying Roman structures. She knew their patterns and methods better than she knew her own handwriting. None of this matched anything she had ever seen. Her hand trembled as she traced a section of the wall and whispered that they were looking at craftsmanship far beyond the technological reach of ancient Rome. Keanu sensed that her fear was not only from the unknown, but from the realization that history might have hidden something much larger than anyone ever imagined. A few steps later, strange markings appeared along the right wall. They glowed faintly under the sweep of their flashlights. The symbols did not resemble Latin. They did not resemble Greek, Etruscan, Phoenician, or any ancient alphabet that Livia could identify. The characters were curved in some places, angular, in others arranged in patterns that seemed intentional but indecipherable. Keanu slowed his pace and leaned closer. Something inside him stirred. The symbols triggered a sensation that was impossible to explain. It felt like déjà vu, as if he had seen these shapes somewhere before. Not in a dream, not in a film set, somewhere deeper though no memory connected to it. Livia touched one of the symbols lightly with the tip of her finger. The wall emitted a faint pulse of warmth, and she jumped back with a gasp. The symbol dimmed again, returning to its dormant glow. She whispered that this should not be possible. Stone did not react to touch. Symbols did not pulse with heat. Keanu kept his eyes focused on the path ahead. The stairway was nearing its end. The polished stone gave way to a flat landing, and beyond that, something massive stood waiting in the shadows. Keanu stepped onto the final landing and raised his flashlight toward the object, standing in the center of the chamber. A large metal door towered over them, reaching nearly to the low ceiling. Its surface was coated in a thin layer of ancient dust, but not a single trace of rust marked the metal. The material was unlike anything they had seen on the stairway. It was smooth, seamless, and strangely reflective, as though it had been forged using methods far beyond the capabilities of any ancient civilization. Livia approached slowly, her voice trembling, as she whispered that this door alone challenged everything historians believed about early engineering. She wiped a section of dust away with one careful swipe, revealing a sheen that looked almost new beneath the grime of centuries. Keanu moved closer, drawn by a sensation he could not describe. The air shifted again, warming around him, pushing a gentle current toward his chest, as if encouraging him to come nearer. He paused only inches from the door. A soft vibration fluttered under his palm before he even touched the surface. It was subtle, steady, and disturbingly purposeful. Livia kept her distance, watching with wide, frightened eyes. She begged him to be cautious, reminding him that they had no idea what this chamber was or who might have built it. Before Keanu could respond, the metal surface responded on its own. A low hum filled the chamber. The edges of the door glowed faintly, casting a pale white light across the polished stone. Then the door began to open, not slowly, not with strain. It opened smoothly and silently, like a machine awakened after a long sleep. Keanu and Livia stood frozen as the darkness beyond the door stirred. This was not archaeology. This was something else entirely. The moment the metal door slid open, a soft, golden glow washed over Keanu and Livia. It felt warm on their faces, gentle and steady, like the first light of dawn rising after a long night. The air no longer carried the sharp cold that had followed them down the stairway. Instead, it held a quiet stillness, as if the chamber before them had been sealed not only from the outside world, but from time itself. Keanu stepped forward cautiously, allowing the light to settle over him. There were no visible lamps, no torches, no electrical fixtures. The illumination seemed to come from the walls themselves, glowing with a warm, natural radiance that breathed life into the space. Livia followed her footsteps, slow and hesitant. She swept her flashlight across the chamber, but it was unnecessary. The light inside responded to their movement, growing brighter in the areas they approached and dimming gently in the corners they left behind. She whispered that this level of engineering was impossible for any known ancient civilization. The Colosseum above them was a marvel of stone and craftsmanship, yet this chamber felt as though it had been created with knowledge far beyond the reach of any empire in history. The room stretched wider than logic allowed. The Colosseum's architecture had limits, but this chamber ignored them. The ceiling curved overhead in a smooth arch made of a material that resembled polished metal but bore no seams. The walls were covered in moving diagrams formed from light, shifting in real time as though reacting to some unseen energy. The shapes resembled maps, star charts, mechanical blueprints, and patterns that neither Keanu nor Livia recognized. The projections floated just above the wall, warm and fluid, almost like a softer form of holography. Keanu moved closer to one of the walls, lifting his hand toward a diagram that resembled a rotating sphere surrounded by orbiting lines. The moment his fingers neared the projection, the lines shifted, rearranging themselves as though acknowledging his presence. Livia gasped and stepped closer, her voice trembling as she asked how any of this could exist beneath a Roman amphitheater built 2,000 years ago. Her breath shook as she asked the question she had been holding inside since the moment they entered. Who built this? Who built? Her words hung in the air, swallowed by the chamber's quiet hum. Keanu did not answer. His attention had been drawn to the far side of the room, where a cluster of tables stood arranged around a raised central platform. The tables were made of a smooth alloy he could not identify, clear of rust despite their age. Tools, crystals, metal cylinders, and thick books lay neatly arranged across them, as though waiting for their owner to return. Keanu walked slowly toward the tables, feeling the atmosphere change around him once again. The air grew warmer, almost inviting, as though the chamber recognized movement after centuries of silence. The objects resting on the metal surfaces were arranged with careful precision. Each item seemed placed with intention, not scattered or abandoned. Livia approached one of the tables and examined a long, cylindrical tube with etched patterns spiraling along its surface. The metal looked unfamiliar. It had the sheen of silver, but carried a density that suggested something much stronger. She lifted it, slightly surprised by how light it felt, almost weightless in her hands. Next to the tube lay a flat panel embedded with crystal-like shards. They glowed faintly when Livia's flashlight passed over them, as if responding to the warmth of the beam. She whispered that these artifacts did not belong to any known culture from the region. Keanu listened, but his attention had already shifted to the platform in the center of the room. A stone pedestal stood at its highest point, illuminated by a focused beam from the ceiling. The light that fell upon it was steady and warm, highlighting an object resting neatly at its center. A book. It was bound in worn leather that had darkened with age, but the stitching remained strong. Dust curled around the edges, soft and undisturbed. Keanu stepped closer and saw that a name had been burned into the cover with a careful hand. The letters formed a clear inscription: Aurelius Ventor. The name sounded Roman, yet the simplicity of the burning and the style of the lettering felt out of place. Livia moved beside him and breathed the name under her breath. She recognized it vaguely as one that appeared in rare historical footnotes, usually associated with an obscure engineer or inventor whose life had been poorly documented. Keanu touched the corner of the leather cover gently. The chamber responded immediately. A low harmonic vibration rippled through the floor and traveled upward through the pedestal. The diagrams on the walls brightened as though awakening. The golden light pulsed in rhythm, with the vibration creating a soft wave that rolled through the space. Livia staggered back in shock, unable to understand why the room reacted to Keanu's touch. Keanu remained still, watching the pages of the journal lift slightly, as if stirred by an invisible breeze. The energy did not feel hostile. It felt aware, patient, almost relieved. It was as though the chamber had been waiting for someone to return after a long absence. And for reasons neither of them could understand, it responded specifically to Keanu. Keanu let his hand rest on the journal a moment longer, feeling the vibration shift from a low hum to a softer resonance that settled beneath his palm. It was steady, almost like the heartbeat of the chamber itself. The glow from the walls dimmed to a calmer tone, as if the room recognized that its message had been acknowledged. Livia stepped closer, again still shaken, but unable to pull her eyes from the pedestal. She whispered that no archaeological discovery had ever behaved like this. Nothing in recorded history described structures that reacted to human presence with such precision. Keanu opened the journal carefully. The pages were thick, uneven, and yellowed with age. The writing inside covered each page in tight lines, but the language was unlike any ancient script Livia had studied. Curves, intersecting strokes, and symbols filled the parchment with patterns that suggested meaning but refused to reveal it. Somehow Keanu felt an uncanny familiarity in the shapes. They stirred something deep within him, like a memory floating just out of reach. Livia leaned in, examining the characters more closely. She recognized none of them. Not Latin, not Greek, not any derivative of known regional languages. Yet the name Aurelius Ventor was undeniably Roman. She wondered aloud how a man of that era could have created a journal written in a language that did not fit any established historical timeline. Keanu turned another page. A gentle pulse shimmered across the walls. The diagrams flickered softly, aligning themselves into new shapes as though responding to the movement. Livia watched with awe, realizing that the chamber was not behaving like a tomb or storage room. It seemed alive, aware, and purposeful. Keanu closed the journal slowly. A sense of quiet certainty filled him. This place had remained untouched for centuries, waiting for someone specific, someone with the right presence, someone it recognized. It had chosen him. Livia steadied herself against the nearest metal table, trying to slow her breathing. Her flashlight hung loosely in her hand, its beam shaking each time her fingers trembled. She forced herself forward, lifting the camera around her neck and beginning to photograph the journal page by page. The shutter clicks echoed softly through the chamber, tiny sounds swallowed by the vast golden light surrounding them. She paused after each photograph, reviewing the images to ensure nothing blurred. The words, even if unreadable in their strange script, felt too important to risk losing. Keanu stood beside the pedestal, the journal open beneath his hands. The soft, harmonic vibration pulsed through the book again as he turned to the next page. The symbols glowed faintly, just enough to outline their curves under the warm light. He traced the name Aurelius Ventor on the first leaf, repeating it slowly, as if tasting the weight of the past. The name grounded him. Everything else in the chamber felt unreal, but that name belonged to a real man who had lived and breathed inside the Roman Empire. Keanu spoke quietly as he read the translated Latin passages written in the margins scattered between lines of the unknown script. Ventor described himself as an inventor plagued with visions. He wrote about images that haunted his dreams, machines that flew through the sky like metal birds, towers taller than any built in his era, shining with beams of light in the night, carriages that moved without horses. Keanu read each description aloud, and Livia stopped photographing long enough to look up at him with wide eyes. It sounded like he was describing modern technology, but in a hand centuries old. The next page grew darker in tone. Venter wrote of warnings. He described a future world so advanced it had forgotten fear. He wrote of disasters he foresaw with such clarity that his hands shook as he recorded them. A great eruption that would strike a crowded city. A collapse of structures meant to last 1,000 years. A storm of fire and smoke that would take millions of lives unless someone someday intervened. Livia whispered that no Roman could have imagined such things, not unless he had seen them, not unless he had truly believed his visions were real. Keanu continued reading. Venter wrote that people in the future would dismiss warnings, choosing comfort over caution. He feared that history repeated itself when lessons were ignored, and so he built this hidden chamber as a message, a plea, a hope waiting in silence. Livia moved closer to the pedestal, her camera hanging forgotten against her chest. The air felt heavier now, thick with meaning, as if the chamber itself listened while Keanu read. She reached out and touched the edge of the journal, shocked by how warm the leather felt. It was impossible for something this old to retain heat, yet it pulsed softly, like living skin. She drew her hand back, whispering that nothing in this room behaved the way objects from antiquity should behave. Keanu turned another page, and the soft hum in the chamber grew louder for a moment, then faded again. Venter described building a device he called the Tempus Lucerna, the lantern of time. He wrote that the device could reveal hidden danger, projecting what he called warnings from the sky itself. Livia leaned closer, scanning every symbol. None matched Latin, none matched Greek, none matched anything she had studied in her years of archaeology. The symbols curved like musical notes, each one shaped with a precision that felt almost mathematical. It was as if they were designed rather than written. Keanu read Venter's explanation of why he created the lantern. Venter claimed he had witnessed a future catastrophe so devastating that even writing about it filled him with dread. He wrote that his visions showed him cities collapsing beneath their own weight, oceans rising against coastal homes, and firestorms sweeping across landscapes faster than people could flee. He feared that leaders in the future would ignore early signs, just as the officials in his own time had ignored warnings about smaller disasters. Venter believed that only a powerful, undeniable sign could save those future people from repeating ancient mistakes. Livia pressed a hand to her mouth. The idea that a Roman inventor had foreseen events that resonated with modern fears chilled her. She whispered that if this journal was real, if Venter had truly seen these things, then he might have been the first person in history to understand that the future could be shaped through intention rather than chance. Keanu kept reading, his voice low and steady. Venter wrote that he was only one man with limited time. He built the chamber as a refuge for his knowledge, a place where someone with enough courage would one day find it, a stranger with a gentle heart, someone who would finish what he began. Keanu stopped there, staring at the words for a long moment. The chamber seemed to breathe with him, waiting for what came next. Keanu stood motionless over the last page, letting the weight of Venter's final message settle around him. The chamber felt impossibly quiet, as if the ancient stone and metal were holding their breath. Livia hovered beside him, afraid to speak, afraid even to blink. She studied Keanu's expression as he reread the final lines again and again, his features softening into something she had never seen on his face before. Awe, sorrow, and a strange recognition blended together, as if some part of him had waited for this moment without ever knowing why. At the bottom of the journal, in a smaller, more delicate script, Venter had written a personal note, a message not for Rome, not for scholars, but for the single person who would find this place. The ink had faded, yet the words glowed faintly beneath the warm golden light. Venter wrote that he had always believed someone would come, someone who would understand that warnings were gifts, not burdens. Someone who would see the world with compassion before they saw it with fear. He called that future stranger the one with the gentle heart. Livia exhaled shakily, whispering that Ventor could not have known who would someday stand in this chamber. But when Keanu rested his fingertips on the page, the soft harmonic vibration returned, rising through the floor, into the pedestal, into the book, until it seemed to travel through him. The resonance was unmistakable. Whatever consciousness or purpose the chamber held responded specifically to him. Not to her, not to anyone else. It welcomed him. Keanu swallowed hard, the sensation unsettling yet deeply familiar, like touching a memory he had never lived but had always carried. He whispered that this discovery was not accidental. The door had opened for him, the lights had awakened for him, and the journal had responded to him. He could not explain how he knew it, but he felt chosen in a way that humbled him rather than elevated him. Livia watched him closely, sensing a shift in the air. She reached for her flashlight and shined it across the room. The light caught dozens of symbols etched into the floor around the pedestal, forming a circular pattern as intricate as a star map. When she knelt to examine them, she realized they formed a sequence, yet not one she recognized. They were not mathematical, not astronomical, not linguistic. They were something else entirely, something that seemed designed to communicate not through reading, but through understanding. Keanu lowered the journal and stepped back, his eyes drawn to the symbols on the floor. The gentle vibration faded as he moved, as if the chamber reluctantly let him go. He took a slow breath, feeling a pressure inside his chest, a tightness just behind his ribs. It wasn't fear, it wasn't pain, it was a calling. He whispered one truth into the quiet chamber, a truth he felt more than understood. This was meant to be found. And somehow, without knowing why, he understood that the journey ahead was far bigger than an archaeological discovery. It was a responsibility handed across centuries by a man who believed in the future more than his own present. Keanu stepped away from the pedestal, his attention pulled toward the far end of the chamber, where a faint glow pulsed behind a curved metal structure. Livia followed his gaze, lifting her flashlight, though she barely needed it. The glow grew brighter with each passing second, as if something inside the structure sensed their presence. They moved slowly toward it, their footsteps echoing across the polished stone floor. The closer they came, the more the temperature changed again. It warmed in gentle waves, like standing near the heartbeat of a living giant buried in the earth. The structure held a large, crystalline sphere, almost the size of a human head. Thin metal arms curved around it in a perfect ring, holding it in place without touching it. The sphere floated unnaturally in the center, suspended on nothing. Its surface was clear at first glance, but as Keanu drew closer, faint flickers of light swirled inside it like trapped starlight, struggling to escape. The soft hum returned much stronger than before, rising and falling with a rhythm that felt both mechanical and organic. It reminded Livia of a distant thunderstorm wrapped in silk. She whispered that the sphere must be part of Ventor's invention. Keanu raised a hand, but he didn't touch it. He simply stood near it, allowing instinct to guide him. At that moment, the entire chamber shifted. The hum deepened, the golden lights dimmed, the crystalline sphere flared to life, with a pulse so bright that Livia stumbled back, shielding her eyes. Keanu held still, letting the light wash over him. The sphere emitted a low chime, delicate and haunting. Then another, then a sequence forming a pattern like an ancient melody, waking from sleep. Livia watched in stunned silence as the sphere rotated its inner lights, swirling faster. A beam extended outward, forming a projection in midair. At first, it was only shifting colors. Then the colors sharpened into shapes. Then the shapes became images. A globe, Earth suspended in the air before them. The holographic Earth rotated slowly, continents glowing gold under the chamber lights. Livia gasped and stepped closer, unable to control her fascination. She whispered that nothing in ancient history even remotely suggested technology like this. Keanu remained silent. He felt the weight of Ventor's final message pressing on him. This machine did not simply reveal knowledge. It revealed truth. The holographic Earth zoomed in smoothly, focusing on Europe, then on Italy, then on the western coast, Rome crystallized into view, ancient and modern outlines merging together. The sphere's lights shifted again, preparing to reveal something far more unsettling. The lantern of time had awakened. The chamber darkened further as the projection zoomed closer, sharpening Rome into an intricate network of buildings, streets, and underground layers. Keanu and Livia stood inches apart, their breath quiet against the vast silence. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The machine spoke for them, drawing its message in light. The projection cut through the Colosseum, peeling back layers of stone like pages in a book. It revealed the subterranean tunnels beneath the arena, the foundations, the ancient supports, and the geological bedrock stretching deep into the earth below. Livia watched with shaking hands. The details were more precise than any archaeological diagram she had ever seen, as if the sphere were pulling real-time data directly from the earth itself. Lines appeared on the hologram, thin at first, then brightening into bold streaks of red and orange. They pulsed like veins. The branching shapes spread outward beneath Rome, tracing the fault lines that ran silently beneath the city. Livia stumbled backward as more red lines appeared. The color grew darker, shifting to crimson along one specific region directly beneath the Colosseum. She whispered that this wasn't possible. The Seismic Institute had reported Rome as stable for years. There was no known fault of this scale under the historical center, yet the projection insisted otherwise. It flashed a warning symbol neither of them recognized, a spiral of red that pulsed in a slow, ominous rhythm. Keanu narrowed his eyes, studying the shape. The symbol appeared again, marking several points beneath the city. Livia gasped when she realized what it meant. Those points were tension nodes, stress markers, places where the earth had built up pressure to a catastrophic degree. She shook her head, whispering that if the earth ruptured under those points, parts of Rome could collapse. Entire blocks, entire districts, the Colosseum itself could fall. The sphere zoomed in even deeper. It mapped the cavern layers below the bedrock, revealing a massive pocket of instability, a hollow space widening over time. A void so large that the ground above it trembled just from the pressure. Livia clutched her stomach, overwhelmed. This void did not appear on any geological survey. Not ancient surveys, not modern ones. The sphere pulsed with red light again, brighter this time. The message was clear. Rome was in danger, not in decades, not in centuries, soon. Keanu stepped closer to the projection, the warm glow wrapping around him like a warning whispered across 2,000 years. The device wasn't malfunctioning. It wasn't guessing. It was predicting. Venter had seen this. Venter had prepared for this. The lantern of time was sounding its alarm. The projection shifted again, transforming the void beneath Rome into a pulsing sphere of red light. It throbbed like a wounded heartbeat. Livia pressed her back against a metal table, her breath ragged. She whispered that if this information was accurate, then Rome's foundations were sitting above a ticking geological bomb. Keanu remained still, absorbing every detail with the calm intensity he was known for, though even he felt the rising dread crawling beneath his skin. The hologram continued its sequence. It drew a predicted rupture line, tracing the path a collapse would take if the void gave way. The line cut through the forum, across several busy streets, through historic buildings, and then arched toward the Colosseum. Red arcs rose from the line, showing projected shockwaves. Buildings toppled in the simulation. Debris cascaded into streets. Thousands of tiny silhouettes represented people caught in the disaster. Livia covered her mouth, unable to watch. The simulation wasn't exaggerated. It looked painfully realistic, as if the sphere had pulled its projections from future data rather than theoretical models. Keanu stepped closer until the projection's light warmed his face. He whispered that Ventor must have seen this in his visions. That was why he built the chamber. That was why he created the Lantern of Time, not as a historical curiosity or an invention to display wonders, but as a warning to whoever lived in the era where the rupture approached. A message across centuries for the one who could finally act. The sphere dimmed the hologram, then displayed a countdown of energy pulses flowing along the fault lines. Livia frowned, trying to interpret the meaning. It didn't show dates. it didn't show years. It showed relative time. Acceleration. Tension increasing faster than expected. She whispered that the Earth wasn't simply unstable. It was accelerating toward a breaking point. The lantern was predicting the moment pressure would exceed the threshold. Keanu asked her how long they had. Livia didn't answer at first. She checked the pulses again, her voice trembling. She estimated weeks, maybe months, but not years. The ground beneath Rome was approaching collapse faster than anyone realized. The chamber hummed again, deeper this time. The crystalline sphere shifted its light toward Keanu, bathing him in gold. The vibration traveled through the floor, up the metal frame into the air around him. Livia felt it too, though softer. It was as if the lantern recognized him the way the journal had. Venter had written that a stranger with a gentle heart would one day finish what he began. The lantern of time had chosen. The projection faded slowly, leaving the chamber dim and trembling with echoes of sound that felt more emotional than mechanical. Keanu stood in the warm glow of the crystalline sphere, breathing deeply, trying to steady himself. The weight behind his ribs tightened again, not from fear but from something deeper, something that felt like recognition, as if 1,000 silent voices across time had placed their hands on his shoulders all at once. Livia stepped toward him, her boots scraping lightly on the polished stone. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, her voice low and trembling as she whispered that they needed to alert the authorities. She insisted that the Institute of Geology, the Cultural Ministry, and the emergency councils had to see this. She kept repeating that if this projection was accurate, Rome needed immediate preparation. Evacuation plans, reinforcement of vulnerable structures, political coordination. She spoke faster and faster as panic overtook her logical mind. Keanu listened, but his eyes remained fixed on the sphere. The lantern of time dimmed, as if it had fallen back asleep. He thought of Ventor's journal, a stranger with a gentle heart, someone who would finish what he began, someone who would act without seeking glory or power. Keanu had spent his life avoiding power. He lived quietly, humbly, choosing honesty over influence, kindness over attention. Now this ancient machine responded to him as if it had been waiting centuries for the touch of his hand. He whispered that authorities wouldn't use this knowledge the way Ventor intended. Livia froze, surprised by the firmness in his tone. Keanu explained that governments hide things. They classify. They bury discoveries that could shift control. A device that predicted disasters before they happened would be seen as a weapon, not a warning. He knew exactly what would happen if he carried the lantern into a government building. It would vanish, locked behind armored doors studied only by a handful of people, while millions lived above a sleeping catastrophe. Livia argued that this wasn't about politics. It was about saving lives. She insisted that professional scientists would know what to do. But Keanu shook his head slowly. His voice softened as he explained that Ventor had built this chamber under a stadium where ordinary people gathered. Not kings, not generals, not scholars. People, workers, families, travelers, the forgotten ones who always suffered first when disaster struck. Ventor hadn't written his journal for emperors. He wrote it for the future stranger who cared about ordinary lives more than power. Keanu felt the weight of destiny tighten around him. This discovery wasn't a headline. It wasn't a museum piece. It was a responsibility passed across centuries. He whispered that he knew what he had to do. Livia stared at Keanu, stunned by the steadiness in his voice. The man standing before her was not the quiet visitor she had guided through the Colosseum earlier. Something inside him had shifted. It was as if the chamber had awakened a part of him he didn't know existed. A part built for responsibility, not fame. A part built for moments like this. She took a slow breath and asked him what he meant. Keanu didn't answer at first. He walked toward the crystalline sphere, studying the metal frame that held it suspended. The machine's glow softened, almost affectionate, like it recognized his presence. He reached out but stopped just short of touching it. His voice was barely above a whisper as he said that warnings only mattered if people trusted the one giving them. Governments turned warnings into politics. Institutions turned warnings into paperwork. But people turned warnings into action. Livia protested. She reminded him that predicting a geological collapse was not the same as warning about a storm. Lives were at stake. He couldn't simply make a social post or give an interview. The world wouldn't believe him without scientific proof. They might dismiss him. They might mock him. They might say he was misled, manipulated, or mentally unstable. She begged him to consider the ridicule, the backlash, the controversy. But Keanu didn't flinch. He had lived through public scrutiny. He had survived rumors, jokes, headlines, and noise. None of it mattered to him now. What mattered were the thousands of tiny silhouettes projected in the lantern's simulation. People walking city streets, people shopping, people laughing, people who would never see disaster coming until the ground swallowed them whole. He turned back to Livia and said that Ventor hadn't chosen a politician. He hadn't chosen a general. He hadn't chosen a scholar. He had chosen someone with a gentle heart, someone who acted out of empathy, not authority. Livia felt tears rise to her eyes. She whispered that she believed him. She believed everything the chamber had shown, but she didn't understand how he expected to share this truth. The world was skeptical. People trusted data institutions, science, not actors, not myths, not ancient warnings carved beneath a stadium. Keanu looked around the chamber one more time. Each metal table, each glowing diagram, each impossible invention waiting quietly in the shadows. He realized that Ventor hadn't created a tool for governments. He had created a tool for humanity itself. He said softly that the truth did not need permission to be heard. It only needed courage to be spoken. And he was ready to speak it. The chamber fell into a deep silence, broken only by the soft hum lingering from the lantern of time. Keanu stood in the center of the room, feeling the gravity of the decision forming inside him. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a plan. It was a truth rising from somewhere older than memory, a truth he couldn't ignore. Livia moved beside him, wiping her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. She asked him gently what he intended to do. Keanu didn't respond right away. He kept staring at the sphere, watching its inner lights drift like captured constellations. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quiet conviction that made Livia straighten. He said he would tell the world himself, not through press conferences, not through committees, not behind closed doors where the powerful whispered over secrets. He would speak directly to the people. He would show them evidence. He would show them the journal, the chamber, the projections. He would reach ordinary families before politicians could bury the truth under layers of bureaucracy and fear. Livia shook her head, overwhelmed. She warned him that revealing the chamber would ignite chaos. People would rush to the Colosseum. Authorities would shut it down, seize everything, deny everything. The world might accuse him of fabricating evidence. They might call it a stunt, a hoax, an illusion. She begged him to see the risk, but Keanu understood risk better than she realized. He had seen how quickly misinformation spread, how often truth was smothered by doubt. Yet he also knew the power of compassion. People listened to him not because he was famous, but because he was earnest, humble, human. He had built a life on sincerity. That sincerity was now the greatest shield he had. He turned toward Livia and reminded her that Ventor built this chamber underground to protect humanity, not to feed the ambitions of rulers. Ventor understood that leaders often ignored warnings until it was too late. That fear of political consequences outweighed fear of losing lives. So he had chosen a messenger from beyond his own era, a stranger who would carry no hunger for power. Keanu whispered that he never sought greatness. He never sought influence. But destiny had its own way of choosing people not by their titles, but by their hearts. Livia asked him one last question. Why him? Why someone who never wanted this responsibility? Keanu stepped back toward the pedestal, resting his hand lightly on the ancient journal. The chamber hummed again, soft and familiar. Because he whispered some warnings can only be trusted when they come from someone who would never seek to deliver them. He took a steady breath. He would reveal the truth, not through politics, but through people. Keanu and Livia made their final sweep around the chamber, gathering only what they could carry in their memories. No photographs, no samples, no evidence except what their minds held. Keanu knew this was intentional. Venter understood that a message preserved only in a human heart could not be seized or destroyed. The chamber dimmed behind them as they stepped toward the stairway, its light fading like a living creature, returning to sleep. They were halfway up the carved steps when a thunderous command echoed above them. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Boots pounded against ancient stone. Keanu instinctively raised his hands in peace as armed soldiers flooded the narrow passageway, shouting in Italian. Livia cried out, trying to shield him, but the soldiers separated them quickly, dragging her toward the surface with rough urgency. Keanu kept calm, kept breathing, kept his voice steady. The soldiers forced his back against the wall, while others rushed past, disappearing into the chamber he had just left. He tried to warn them about the fragile artifacts, but his voice was drowned beneath their shouts. They moved with the precision of a team trained for emergencies, not archaeological exploration. This wasn't a casual response. Someone high in the chain of command had issued orders the moment they detected movement underground. Livia screamed his name as they pulled her up through the access tunnel. Keanu watched helplessly as her figure vanished around the corner. Two soldiers tightened restraints around his wrists, even though he didn't fight back. They took his bag, his phone, his notebook, and the small tools he carried for the tour. Every possession was stripped from him with practiced indifference. When they reached the surface, the night air felt sharp and thin. Floodlights illuminated the Colosseum's restricted zone. Dozens of personnel were already stationed around the perimeter. Police, cultural ministry officials, military personnel. More than he had ever expected. Keanu blinked against the brightness, but he stayed composed. He had faced danger before. He had faced loss, violence, exhaustion, and chaos, but nothing felt as heavy as the knowledge he carried now. Two officers ushered him into a transport van. Livia was already gone. He asked where they had taken her, but no one answered. They closed the doors, locking him in darkness as the engine rumbled to life. Through the metal walls, Keanu heard one thing clearly, an official voice on a radio saying they had found a possible, unauthorized excavation. That was the narrative being built around him. Trespassing, interference, illegal entry into protected heritage zones. It was the first step in burying the truth, just like the Romans had buried Ventor. The transport van stopped after several minutes of winding through narrow Roman streets. Keanu could tell from the echo of footsteps outside that he had been taken to a government facility, not a police station. The doors opened, and two stern-faced officials escorted him inside. Their expressions carried neither anger nor curiosity, only protocol. He was led down a hallway lined with surveillance cameras and into a plain interrogation room with a metal table and a single chair. They removed his restraints, but kept two guards stationed at the door. One official asked for his cooperation. Keanu nodded politely, giving them no reason to escalate. He sat down quietly. His heart rate remained steady. Every trace of fear or frustration stayed beneath the surface. He had learned long ago that calmness disarmed aggression better than any argument. A second official placed his belongings on the table one by one. His phone, his notebook, his bag, even loose items from his pockets. They photographed each object, documenting everything with meticulous care. When they finished, the first official asked why he had entered a restricted zone. Keanu answered honestly. He had been on a private tour with an authorized researcher. The wall shifted unexpectedly. They found a hidden passage no one had documented before. The officials exchanged a quick glance. They asked him to clarify how a wall shifted. Keanu explained without embellishment. His voice stayed soft, steady, almost gentle. He told them about the hairline crack, the cold stone, the way it responded to touch. He did not mention the chamber, the lantern of time, or the ancient journal. He simply said they discovered something unusual and followed the passage out of concern for safety. The officials took notes silently. Their eyes betrayed nothing. After a few minutes, they asked about Livia Caruso. They claimed she was being questioned separately to verify his story. Keanu sensed the unspoken implication. They suspected conspiracy. They suspected unauthorized digging potentially valuable artifacts moved without permission. They were looking for a crime, something simple they could file in a report. Keanu kept answering with calm clarity, offering no details they could twist. He watched their faces carefully. These were not men seeking truth, these were men seeking containment. When they finished their initial questioning, the guards escorted him down another hallway. The door they stopped at was different. He could feel it. A thicker frame, a heavier lock. This was where real decisions were made. They opened the door. Inside sat a single man in a tailored black suit, older with sharp eyes that missed nothing. A government minister. And he was waiting for Keanu alone. The minister did not stand when Keanu entered. He simply gestured toward the empty chair across from him. His expression was unreadable, carved from years of political caution. Keanu sat quietly, his hands resting calmly on the table. The room felt colder than the others, insulated from noise, insulated from truth. This was not a place where facts were discovered, it was a place where narratives were decided. The minister began with polite remarks about Keanu's reputation, his kindness, his influence, his global recognition. His voice moved slowly, like someone easing into a conversation he already controlled. Then he shifted. He asked in measured tones what exactly Keanu had seen beneath the Colosseum. Keanu kept his gaze steady. He described only the discovery of the hidden passageway. Nothing more. The minister leaned forward. He said sensors had detected unusual energy signatures underground. He said drones had captured fragments of strange metallic reflections. He said the area was now classified. His eyes narrowed as he asked Keanu if he understood the severity of trespassing in protected zones. Keanu answered respectfully. He said he understood, but he also insisted that the discovery was accidental. The minister studied him for a long moment, then spoke plainly. There was to be no mention of the hidden chamber, no mention of artifacts, no mention of symbols or ancient mechanisms. He emphasized that the Colosseum was not just a monument. It was a symbol of national heritage. Anything strange found beneath it could cause panic chaos or political instability. He said the public did not need to know. Not yet. Not ever, if possible. Keanu remained calm, silent, giving nothing away. The minister then delivered the real warning. If any detail of what Keanu found were to reach the public, he would be held legally accountable for inciting instability. He would be charged with interfering in national archaeological security. The minister said the world trusted Keanu, and that trust could cause chaos if he spoke carelessly. Keanu finally lifted his eyes. He asked a single question. If something dangerous threatened the city, shouldn't people be warned? The minister didn't hesitate. He said that any potential danger would be evaluated internally. He said the government would decide what to reveal. Keanu recognized the truth behind the polished words. They intended to bury whatever they had found. They intended to hide Ventor's message. They intended to protect power, not people. He breathed slowly, letting his calm return. He thanked the minister for his time and spoke no more. But inside, one quiet truth crystallized. The Romans buried Ventor's warning, and now 2,000 years later their successors were prepared to bury it again. Keanu knew he could not let that happen. Keanu walked out of the government facility just before sunrise. Rome glowed with the first hints of morning light, soft and golden against the ancient stones. A car waited for him at the curb, unmarked, silent, and clearly assigned to monitor him. He gave the driver a polite nod, then began walking instead, feeling the city breathe around him. Every corner, every cobblestone, every whisper of wind reminded him of the truth buried beneath the Colosseum. The danger wasn't gone. It was only hidden. He knew they were watching him. Phones tapped, emails flagged, movements tracked. But he did not let it show. He moved through the city with his usual gentle presence, grateful quiet blending into the morning crowds. He returned to his hotel, packed his things slowly, and booked a flight under a different name, a habit he had learned over the years to maintain privacy. By the time authorities realized he had left Rome, he would already be halfway across the Atlantic. Livia, however, did not have such freedom. Within hours of the incident, she was suspended from her research program, her funding frozen, her office sealed, her badge revoked. Official letters arrived at her apartment demanding her cooperation with the investigation. They did not arrest her, but the message was clear. She had uncovered something she was never meant to see. Still, she refused to be silenced. She kept working from her small kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of printed notes, backup drives, and hastily scribbled translations. She had managed to photograph fragments of Ventor's journal before the soldiers confiscated her equipment. Not enough to reveal the entire message, but enough to hint at something astonishing. As she decoded the symbols late at night, she realized Ventor wasn't simply predicting the future. He was remembering it. His descriptions of machine cities and disasters matched no known knowledge from Roman times. They sounded like memories from a mind displaced in time. Meanwhile, Keanu began his own quiet resistance. He reached out to independent seismologists across Europe, North America, and Japan. He funded their research anonymously through foundations he had supported for years. He asked them to study Rome's subterranean patterns, geological shifts, and unusual tremors. He never mentioned the chamber. He never mentioned Ventor. He focused only on data, convincing them it was worth investigating. He spent hours reading ancient Roman engineering manuscripts, studying blueprints, and piecing together how such an advanced chamber could exist. Every night, the same truth returned to him. The lantern's warning was real. The countdown had already begun. Livia barely slept as she worked through the symbols. They were unlike anything she had encountered in her field. Curved lines that shimmered with layered meaning. Sequences that resembled formulas more than language. Patterns that echoed modern physics rather than ancient scripts. She cross-referenced every fragment with her knowledge of ancient alphabets. Nothing came close. She tried Greek, Etruscan, Latin variations, even older Egyptian forms. Each attempt failed. One night, as she sifted through the photos on her laptop, she noticed a repeated sequence on the corner of 3 pages, a looping curve intersecting with a straight diagonal line. She zoomed in. The symbol repeated in slightly altered forms, almost like instructions. She matched them to the lantern's etched markings she had seen in the chamber. For the first time, something aligned. She realized these weren't letters. They were operational commands. Ventor wasn't writing. He was encoding functions. Her pulse quickened as she transcribed every symbol she could recall from memory. She rearranged them, rotated them, combined them. Slowly, a message emerged, not word for word, but in concept. Ventor had known the future collapse wasn't random. He claimed to have witnessed the moment the Earth would break long before modern instruments existed. He said the city had been built on unstable breath, a fragile balance that would one day shatter. He knew because he had lived long enough to see it. She sat back in her chair, shaking. It sounded impossible, even absurd. A Roman engineer with memories of the future. A man displaced in time. Yet the chamber wasn't impossible. The lantern wasn't impossible. So how could Ventor be? Meanwhile, Keanu arrived in Los Angeles quietly. No entourage, no interviews. He slipped into his home and closed the door with a heaviness that had nothing to do with jet lag. Every image from the lantern replayed in his mind. Red fault lines, fractures, collapse zones. The faces of the people represented by small silhouettes. He kept seeing the children, the elderly, the tourists, the workers, all caught in the disaster predicted centuries ago. He began building a plan. He contacted an old friend who specialized in geological imaging. He asked her to run simulations based on various stress models under Rome. He sent another expert research funds to study underground acoustic anomalies. None of them knew their work was connected. To the outside world, it looked like Keanu Reeves was quietly supporting scientific research, something he had done many times before. But this time, every step he took was deliberate. Every call he made was part of a larger mission. Every decision brought him closer to the truth Ventor wanted the world to hear. and closer to the danger the authorities were trying to bury. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after the Colosseum incident. Livia woke before dawn, her apartment filled with open books and glowing laptop screens. She had spent the night analyzing one particular sequence of symbols. Something in it felt familiar, almost mathematical. When she rotated the pattern 90 degrees, the meaning finally aligned. It wasn't a passage, it was a timetable, a warning encoded through shifting geometric forms rather than language. Her heart pounded as she calculated the sequence again. It pointed to seismic instability beneath Rome that would accelerate month by month. She layered the data over modern fault line maps, and the correlation was undeniable. Venter's predictions matched contemporary models far too closely to be coincidence. And the final symbol at the end of the sequence was unmistakable. It indicated collapse, not centuries away, not decades, months. She reviewed everything again, hoping she had misread the data, but the numbers held. Ventor had known the timing with eerie precision. He had encoded a countdown long before modern science had the tools to confirm it. She reached for her phone with trembling hands. The government had confiscated her official devices, but she still had one old personal phone they didn't know about. She opened a secure messaging app she used during field research and sent a single line to Keanu. "We don't have much time." Keanu received the message while standing alone in his kitchen, reviewing geological reports he had funded from around the world. His experts had not connected the dots, but he had. Every dataset showed abnormal tension beneath Rome. Every projection hinted at instability. Livia's message confirmed what he feared most. The rupture wasn't theoretical, it was imminent. And now the responsibility Ventor had left across 2,000 years rested squarely on his shoulders. Keanu returned to Rome quietly, slipping into the city without fanfare, without press, without the noise that usually followed him. He wore simple clothes, a hat, sunglasses, nothing to draw attention. Yet even in disguise, the energy around him changed. He walked with purpose, guided by the weight of what he knew and the urgency Livia's message had confirmed. The countdown was real. The fault lines beneath the ancient city were tightening each day, building toward a moment that would reshape history if no one acted. But Keanu didn't rush into warning speeches or public declarations. He moved through the city the way he always lived, gently, humbly, human to human. He funded a network of independent earthquake sensors, installing them in small businesses, cafes, community centers, and corner shops throughout the historic districts. He paid for upgrades to aging structural supports in schools and residential blocks near vulnerable zones. He quietly financed emergency preparedness drills through local charities, presenting them as community engagement programs rather than disaster warnings. He sat with families over late dinners. He visited shopkeepers early in the morning while shutters were still rolling up. He talked with teachers, custodians, construction crews, taxi drivers, and elderly residents who had lived through storms, blackouts, and political upheavals. He listened to their fears, their stories, their hopes for their city. He encouraged them to take safety seriously, to have plans, to know routes, to trust their instincts. He never mentioned the chamber. He never mentioned the lantern. He never spoke Ventor's name. Yet his presence alone shifted something in the hearts of those he met. People trusted him in a way that was rare. They believed in his sincerity. They felt the quiet urgency beneath his words. They began preparing small emergency kits. Families practiced exit routes. Schools updated safety protocols. Businesses reinforced storerooms and back exits. The ripple was subtle but powerful. Journalists noticed his unusual activities. Why was Keanu Reeves spending so much time in Rome's older neighborhoods instead of tourist areas? Why was he donating quietly to geological research groups? Why was he funding emergency readiness programs in districts known for seismic vulnerability? Articles began to surface. Nothing accusatory but curious. Something was happening, something he wasn't talking about. While the world speculated, Livia worked in the shadows. Her translations continued late into the night, charting Ventor's symbols into coherent fragments. One final passage emerged a description not of the rupture, but of the one who would prevent it. A man with a wounded past and a soul that carries light. She froze. There was only one person Ventor could have meant. Livia read the translated line again, her fingers trembling as she traced the curved symbols on the screen. She whispered Ventor's words aloud, almost afraid of their meaning. A wounded past, a soul that carries light. The description fit no emperor, no general, no scholar of Ventor's era. It didn't fit any modern leader either, but it fit Keanu with painful accuracy. She remembered the way the lantern had reacted to him, the way the chamber seemed to sense his presence, the resonance that vibrated through the floor when he touched Ventor's journal. He had not forced his way into the mystery. The mystery had opened itself to him. She sat back in her chair, staring at the wall as the truth settled like a weight in her chest. Ventor had predicted him, not by name, not by face, but by essence, by the kind of heart he would carry. She felt a surge of fear, awe, and responsibility all at once. The world needed him. Rome needed him. And time was running short. Across the city, Keanu continued moving quietly, spreading preparation through conversation rather than alarm. He visited a community center where children practiced emergency drills disguised as games. He funded a seismic research group that monitored underground vibrations in real time. He approached construction teams in older districts, offering support to strengthen weakened structures. He asked no one to believe in prophecies. He never spoke of ancient chambers. His actions were practical, grounded, and rooted in compassion. The effect was unmistakable. Neighborhoods grew more aware. Families formed informal safety groups. Volunteers distributed readiness kits. Conversations about earthquakes became normal instead of fearful. A subtle shift spread through the city like a warm current. People were not panicking, they were preparing. Yet officials watched him closely. His presence unsettled them. They felt something moving beneath the surface, something they could not control. Rumors circulated within government offices. Some said Keanu knew something. Some said he had discovered unauthorized artifacts. Some whispered that the military wanted to question him again, but no one confronted him directly. Not yet. Late one evening, after meeting a group of small business owners out near the forum, Keanu stepped outside into the cool Roman air. He looked at the ground beneath his feet, knowing what lay far below. The fault lines, the tension, the countdown. He placed a hand gently over his chest, feeling that familiar pull from the chamber, a pull that had not faded since the night he discovered the hidden doorway. His phone buzzed, a message from Livia. "We need to meet. I found something important." He knew instantly that whatever she discovered would change everything again. Keanu arrived at the quiet cafe. Livia had chosen a small place, tucked between two narrow alleys away from tourist crowds and security patrols. She sat at a corner table, her hood-up eyes alert and tense. When he approached, she didn't smile. She simply slid a folded page across the table, a printed translation. Her hands shook slightly. He unfolded it carefully. The fragment was short, barely 4 lines, but every word carried the weight of centuries. A man who walks with the sorrow of lost years, a soul tempered by kindness, a heart untouched by ambition. He will be the light that steadies the earth when it trembles. Keanu read it twice, then a third time. The cafe around them faded into silence. Livia watched his face closely, waiting for anger or disbelief. Instead, he exhaled slowly, almost sadly. He didn't want prophecy. He didn't want destiny. But the words resonated with the same quiet truth he had felt in the chamber. He wasn't chosen for his fame or ability. He was chosen because he cared. Livia leaned in and explained how she had decoded the fragment. She showed him the symbols, the rotations, the mathematical structures hidden beneath Ventor's script. She told him the translation wasn't metaphorical. Ventor had seen something, remembered something, or understood something that defied time. He had predicted the rupture, and he had predicted the one who would respond to it. Keanu folded the page carefully and tucked it into his jacket. He said softly that none of this mattered unless they acted. Livia nodded, swallowing hard. She told him the updated timeline she calculated. The rupture window had narrowed. Weeks had become days. Rome was standing on the edge of a silent catastrophe. Keanu looked out the window at the ancient streets filled with evening lights and people laughing as they walked. Families, couples, children, all unaware of the danger growing beneath them. He felt the weight of their lives press against his chest, like a hand made of light and responsibility. He turned back to Livia with calm resolve. They didn't have the power of governments, but they had truth, they had courage, and they had each other. The world was beginning to stir. Now they had to wake it. The first tremor struck Rome just after midnight. A deep, rolling vibration moved through the city like a forgotten giant, shifting beneath the earth. Keanu woke instantly. The glass of water beside his hotel bed rippled. The floor beneath him trembled not violently, but with a slow, heavy pulse that felt more like a warning than an earthquake. He sat up, placing his feet on the floor, feeling the subtle shift beneath the soles of his shoes. It wasn't the kind of tremor tourists laughed off the next morning. It was the kind that carried intention. His phone buzzed before he could reach for it. Livia's name flashed across the screen. When he answered, her voice came through in a breathless rush. She said the sensors he funded had all spiked at once. Not small spikes, massive surges. The readings looked identical to Ventor's predicted rupture pattern. Several districts were showing underground distortions. A deep shift was making its way toward the older neighborhoods. Keanu asked how long they had. Livia didn't answer immediately. She checked her data again, whispering numbers, recalculating as the machines updated. She finally said it wasn't a collapse yet, but the formation of one. The underground cavity was expanding. Pressure plates were shifting. It could trigger catastrophic collapses in residential areas if the rupture continued along the projected line. Keanu stood slowly walking toward the window overlooking the city. The ancient streets were quiet under moonlight. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing looked dangerous. But he knew what lay beneath the beauty. He had seen the lantern simulation. He had watched the hologram show buildings crumbling like sand. He had stood in a chamber built 2,000 years earlier by a man who predicted this moment. He told Livia to notify the authorities immediately. She already had. She had called emergency offices, geological councils, and municipal authorities. The responses were predictable. They told her they needed confirmation, they needed cross-checking, they needed more data. They asked if her equipment might be malfunctioning. They asked her to wait until morning. They promised to assemble a committee. Keanu closed his eyes. He had seen this pattern before. Hesitation disguised as caution delay, disguised as procedure doubt, disguised as professionalism. It wasn't evil, it was human. People wanted certainty even when certainty came too late. Livia begged him to do something, anything. She said people were sleeping in buildings that rested on unstable ground. She said she could already see the signs. The rupture was forming exactly as Ventor had warned. Keanu opened his eyes again. He knew what he had to do. He would go public. Keanu moved with steady purpose as the city trembled again, a second low rumble passing through the walls of his hotel. He packed nothing except his phone and a small notebook filled with observations he had made since returning to Rome. He didn't need equipment. He didn't need proof. What he needed was a voice, a way to reach people faster than the government ever would. He left the hotel through a side exit, walking into the cool night air. The streets were still calm, but the pigeons along the rooftops had scattered their instincts sharper than human senses. A taxi waited at the corner, the driver half asleep behind the wheel. Keanu tapped the window. The driver jolted awake, surprised to see him, but Keanu simply asked to be taken to the city center. His tone was soft but urgent. The driver nodded and pulled away from the curb without questions. As they drove through narrow Roman streets, Keanu pulled up his private social accounts, ones the public didn't know he used. He typed a message to a trusted friend in the media, someone who had respected him for decades. He asked for a live broadcast slot within the hour. No interviews, no preparation, just a camera and a connection. The friend responded almost instantly, sensing the gravity behind the request. A studio team was already assembling when the taxi reached the center. Meanwhile, Livia was in her apartment, surrounded by blinking monitors. The seismic maps were worsening by the minute. She sent messages to every contact she had, urging them to push warnings through their networks. She called former colleagues, independent journalists, and activists. Some listened, some didn't. But she kept going, her voice trembling with urgency as she repeated the same sentence again and again. The rupture has begun. You must warn people. Back at the improvised broadcast studio, Keanu stepped into the quiet room with dim lights and a single camera pointed at an empty chair. The crew didn't ask what he planned to say. They trusted him, or maybe they sensed something larger than themselves taking shape. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and waited for the signal. His heart was steady, his breathing calm. He thought of the chamber beneath the Colosseum, the cold stone, the impossible symbols, the lantern's red projections showing lives lost. He thought of Ventor writing warnings across centuries in a journal meant for a stranger he had never met. The director counted down. 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. Keanu looked into the camera and prepared to warn the world. The broadcast began without music, without titles, without dramatic framing. Just Keanu sitting alone in a quiet room illuminated by soft studio light. His face carried no panic, no theatrics, only a steady compassion that drew people in the moment their screens flickered alive. He introduced himself not as an actor, not as a celebrity, but as someone who had seen concerning seismic activity in Rome. He explained calmly and clearly that multiple independent sensors were detecting unusual underground pressure. He urged residents in older districts to stay vigilant, prepare emergency kits, and avoid basements or unstable structures until more data could be gathered. He never mentioned prophecy. He never mentioned the chamber or Ventor. He made no claims of certainty, only concern. Within minutes, the live stream spread across social platforms. People began sharing it with friends. Viewers translated it into different languages. Some felt fear, others felt gratitude. Many felt something they had never experienced from a public warning sincerity without agenda. Livia watched from her apartment, tears welling, as she listened to the steadiness in his voice. He was doing exactly what Ventor predicted, guiding people with empathy, not authority. The city began to respond. Families stepped outside to check their buildings. Neighbors called one another. Community centers unlocked their doors for people seeking safer shelter. The early stirrings of preparedness spread through the streets like a rising tide. Meanwhile, government officials scrambled. They debated whether to shut down the broadcast. They argued about public perception, political fallout, and economic damage. They held meetings, demanded reports, and tried to reach Keanu's team for clarification. But Keanu kept speaking, urging calm action over fear, human connection over hesitation. The tremors deepened beneath Rome, and the world finally began to listen. The studio lights dimmed after the broadcast, but Keanu did not leave right away. He stayed in the quiet room for several minutes, listening to the fading hum of equipment around him. He could feel the world shifting, not through noise or chaos, but through a quiet awakening. People had heard his voice, people had listened, and somewhere deep inside Rome, the earth continued its slow, dangerous stirring. Within an hour, the video spread across social platforms. Clips circulated on news pages shared by families, students, tourists, and strangers who didn't know why Keanu Reeves was warning them, but trusted him enough to listen. The message wasn't dramatic. It wasn't designed to scare. It was steady and human. He spoke like someone who cared more about their safety than his reputation. That sincerity resonated deeper than any government alert ever could. In apartments across Rome, families softly woke their children and began packing bags. Some gathered documents and medicines. Others filled water bottles, grabbed flashlights, and made plans to stay with relatives living farther from the fault zones. People stepped outside their homes, whispering to neighbors, calmly discussing escape routes and gathering points. No one shouted, no one panicked. They simply prepared. In the quiet streets, headlights flickered on as cars began moving towards safer areas. Meanwhile, scientists around the world paused when they saw Keanu's message. Some had already noticed unusual readings in European geological databases. Others had received privately funded datasets from anonymous donors, data Keanu himself had quietly financed. They began to cross-reference his warning with their own observations. What they found unsettled them. Pressure readings beneath Rome were unusual. The underground resonance was abnormal. Several small shifts had occurred without explanation. Emergency groups overseas began contacting their Italian colleagues. Independent geological labs submitted urgent reports. Networks of seismologists exchanged messages late into the night, many saying the same thing. Something was happening beneath Rome, and it needed immediate attention. But even as the world reacted with caution and compassion, the Italian government erupted into panic. Officials called emergency meetings. Advisors shouted across long tables. Ministers argued about public perception, economic risk, tourism fallout, and political responsibility. Some insisted Keanu was spreading misinformation. Others worried he knew more than he admitted. A few demanded he be detained again for questioning. They drafted statements accusing him of causing unnecessary fear. They threatened legal action, claiming he was meddling in national security matters. They debated releasing countermessages urging the public to remain calm and ignore unverified sources. But outside those meeting rooms, the world kept sharing his message. Because people trusted Keanu Reeves. Because he had never used his voice carelessly. Because he had never chased attention or manipulated fear. And because his warning spoken softly in the middle of the night felt like the truth. As dawn broke over Rome, the ripple effect of Keanu's message became unmistakable. News anchors across Europe interrupted regular programming to replay his calm, steady warning. They analyzed his words not for scandal, but for sincerity. Interviews with seismologists appeared on morning shows. Some experts cautiously said there was reason for concern. Others pointed to unusual pressure readings they were already monitoring. A few admitted off camera that they had been waiting for someone influential enough to speak up and draw attention to the abnormalities. In dozens of neighborhoods, people stood outside their buildings watching the sunrise with anxious but determined eyes. Parents held their children's hands a little tighter. Seniors were escorted to safer relatives' homes. Small groups formed outside community centers, sharing updates, handing out simple supplies, and talking about what might come next. Rome felt different, more awake, more connected. The city had not descended into chaos as officials feared. Instead, a rare unity emerged. Keanu walked through the early morning streets with his hood up, unnoticed by most. He stopped at a corner bakery where a young mother packed a stroller with blankets and food. When she recognized him, her eyes filled with emotion. She told him she had seen his message and had decided to leave the district for a few days. She thanked him for giving people time, for giving families a chance to make choices before it was too late. Keanu placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and wished her safety. She hugged him before walking away. Elsewhere, Livia sat in her apartment, responding to messages from journalists who had somehow found her number. They asked about seismic threats about the chamber, about what she knew. She told them she could not confirm details, but she encouraged them quietly to investigate the geological anomalies beneath Rome. She avoided names, she avoided specifics, but her hints helped push several independent reporters into action. Soon, investigative journalists were contacting university labs and cross-checking pressure readings with global databases. By midday, hashtags related to earthquake preparedness in Rome were trending worldwide. Videos showed residents calmly packing vehicles and explaining evacuation routes. Volunteers organized transportation for the elderly and disabled. Schools prepared temporary relocation plans. Churches opened their doors for community support. The world watched as a city famous for its history began preparing for a future threat most had never imagined. Inside government halls, officials were in turmoil. Their accusations against Keanu had backfired. Every attempt to discredit him was met with public pushback. People asked why the government wasn't acting faster. Why an actor seemed more concerned about the public than elected leaders. Why officials were debating instead of warning citizens. The narrative slipped from their control. Yet Keanu never once raised his voice. He never defended himself. He never responded to hostility. He simply kept helping. As pressure built beneath Rome, Keanu continued moving through the city, quietly stopping wherever people gathered. He visited shelters that had begun filling with families seeking safer ground. He spoke gently with children who clung to backpacks and blankets. He reassured elderly residents who feared leaving homes they had lived in for decades. His calm presence eased tension more than any official announcement could. Livia joined him later that evening, slipping through side streets to avoid being followed. When she reached him, she found him kneeling beside an elderly man who was struggling with his suitcase. She watched the way Keanu lifted the bag without hesitation and walked with the man toward a waiting van. No cameras, no speeches, just compassion guiding his choices. The two of them stepped aside as the van pulled away. Livia told him the latest readings showed the underground cavity widening faster than projected. Keanu nodded, already expecting the news. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't shaken. He simply asked how they could help people reach safer zones faster. Around them, the city continued to mobilize. Families moved with urgency, but not panic. Volunteers guided traffic. Community groups shared updates. Keanu's warning had done what officials refused to do. It saved lives. The rupture struck just before dawn, when the sky over Rome was still a faint blue-gray, and the city had not yet begun to stir. It began as a soft vibration, like the tremor of a distant train rolling beneath the earth. Then the vibration deepened, swelling into a heavy, resonant groan that echoed through quiet streets. Birds scattered into the sky in panicked spirals. Dogs barked uneasily inside shuttered apartments. The city seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the ground shifted. A deep cracking sound split the stillness, followed by a roar that rose from beneath the earth like the bellow of something ancient breaking free. A section of underground chambers outside the city's eastern edge collapsed. Streets buckled. Cobblestones snapped and lifted as if pulled by invisible hands. Sidewalks opened into jagged seams. A historic neighborhood built over the older tunnels shuddered violently as a section of earth gave way. Residents who remained watched in horror as parts of the roadway folded inward, swallowing sections of pavement. Two small residential buildings lost their foundations and tilted, collapsing partially into the widening cavity. Dust surged into the air, clouding the early light with a pale rising haze. But something extraordinary happened next. Where there should have been screams echoing through the streets, there was mostly silence. Where emergency crews should have been overwhelmed, they moved with calm coordination. People were already gone. Families had left days earlier, carrying bags and essentials after hearing Keanu's warning. Schools had moved children to temporary facilities. Hospitals had relocated vulnerable patients out of the affected zones. More than 60,000 residents had quietly evacuated. Only a fraction had stayed behind, mostly those who refused to believe anything could happen. Even then, injuries were minor. Scrapes, bruises, a few fractures, a miracle by every measure. Livia watched the live news broadcast from her apartment, her hand covering her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. Helicopter footage showed the cracked streets, the sun rising behind a plume of dust, the remnants of ancient structures now exposed like broken ribs of the city. The collapse was exactly what the lantern had predicted. The seismic lines, the pressure build, the weakness beneath the district. Venter's prophecy had not been myth. It had not been coincidence. It had been a warning. And Keanu had prevented one of the largest urban disasters in modern Italian history. She sank into her chair, overwhelmed, whispering his name through trembling breaths. Emergency crews rushed into the damaged district as dust still swirled in the morning air. Firefighters moved door to door, checking every structure. Drones scanned the widening cavity, mapping fractures beneath the surface. Engineers examined the collapse line and whispered among themselves, astonished that no mass casualties had occurred. Reporters arrived minutes later, broadcasting images of the cracked earth, the broken pavement, and the exposed chambers deep below. The public reaction was immediate. Families who had evacuated days earlier recorded videos thanking the anonymous warning they had followed. Others posted messages saying that they had listened only because Keanu Reeves had spoken so gently, so sincerely, that ignoring him felt impossible. Across social platforms, stories circulated of parents who left their homes in the middle of the night, just in case grandparents who stayed with relatives outside the city, and whole apartment blocks that relocated temporarily because neighbors convinced one another. The phrase, "He saved us," began appearing everywhere. Meanwhile, government scientists stepped forward reluctantly. Under pressure from reporters and international geological groups, they admitted that the rupture had been forming for months. The collapse was not a freak accident. It was the result of long-term structural tension beneath the city tension that should have been noticed earlier. Their hesitation to acknowledge the danger had left Rome vulnerable. During an emergency press briefing, a senior seismologist revealed that independent sensors placed throughout Rome, many traced back to anonymous funding, had provided crucial data. When asked about the identity of the donor, he hesitated, then said the public already knew. Keanu Reeves. The room erupted with questions. How did he know? Why was he involved? Why didn't the government act? But government officials had no answers. Their attempts to discredit him days earlier now made them appear negligent. Every accusation they had thrown at him collapsed under the weight of what had happened at dawn. Their hesitation had nearly cost the city thousands of lives. Only his early warning, his calm truth, and the quiet preparations he encouraged had prevented a catastrophe. Across Italy, people demanded transparency. Crowds gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read, "We want the truth," and "Why did Keanu know?" First international news networks ran continuous coverage, replaying his broadcasts side by side with footage of the collapse zone. And in every report, in every interview, one truth grew louder. He hadn't done it for attention. He had done it because he cared. Keanu stood at a distance from the collapse site, watching rescue crews navigate the cracked terrain. He wore no special gear, no press badge, and made no attempt to step into the spotlight. He remained on the edge of the scene, just another witness to the aftermath of a tragedy that could have been far worse. Volunteers recognized him and approached quietly, thanking him with trembling voices. Parents hugged their children a little tighter when they saw him. One woman burst into tears, saying she would have been home with her newborn if not for his warning. Keanu simply nodded, offering gentle words and warm embraces. He never claimed credit. He never mentioned the chamber or Ventor. He spoke only of the importance of listening to instincts and caring for one another. His calm, grounded presence soothed people more than any official statement could. Livia arrived soon after, weaving through barricades until she reached him. She looked exhausted, but relieved. She told him that international geological agencies were now confirming the same instability the lantern had predicted. Scientists were calling the early evacuation the most effective civilian response to a geological threat in modern Italian history. She added that reporters were demanding a full explanation, and the government could no longer hide behind procedural excuses. Keanu listened silently as she spoke. He watched as firefighters lifted a stray cat from the rubble and handed it to a crying child. He saw neighbors helping neighbors, strangers, offering water, volunteers, clearing pathways for emergency teams. Rome was shaken, but alive. Livia placed a hand on his arm and whispered the truth neither of them could deny anymore. Ventor had been right, and now the world wanted to know why. 2 days after the collapse, Rome was still covered in dust and disbelief. Streets remained blocked, damaged buildings were cordoned off, and engineers worked through the night to assess stability. But the deeper tremor running through the city wasn't geological. It was emotional. People knew Keanu Reeves had warned them before officials did. They knew thousands of lives had been spared because he chose empathy over silence. The public no longer saw him as a visitor or a celebrity. They saw him as the man who had saved Rome. That shift changed everything. Keanu and Livia met privately at dawn at a quiet cafe near the outer walls of the Colosseum. She wore a long coat and kept her head down. He blended into the early morning crowd with a hood and dark glasses. When they sat together, no words were needed at first. The weight of what they had prevented lay between them like a silent truth. At last, Livia told him that the world's questions were growing louder. Reporters demanded explanations. Governments wanted answers. Scientists wanted access to whatever knowledge he had used. And yet, none of them knew the real origin of the warning. Keanu nodded. He knew what she meant. The truth had been sealed underground, hidden behind military barricades, guarded by men who were ordered to erase the discovery from history. But after the collapse, after the evidence matched the lantern's predictions perfectly, the time for secrecy was over. He said quietly that they needed to go back. Livia froze for a moment, then realized he was right. The world needed proof, not rumors, not theories. Proof that the warning came from something ancient, extraordinary, and meant for the future. They paid for their coffee and walked together toward the restricted zone. As they approached, military vehicles and barricades lined the outer entrance. Uniformed soldiers guarded newly reinforced fences, but something had changed since their last visit. People recognized Keanu from a distance. The soldiers exchanged uncertain looks. They had seen the footage. They had seen the evacuation numbers. They had watched their own families leave the city because of his message. Now he stood before them calm and unarmed, asking for passage. A young soldier stepped forward. His voice trembled slightly as he said that orders were to keep everyone out, but his eyes betrayed hesitation. Keanu didn't argue. He simply explained gently that the truth lay below. The soldier swallowed hard, then stepped aside. No one wanted to be the one to stop the man who saved Rome. Keanu and Livia walked through the gate. The world was about to learn everything. The air inside the restricted tunnel was colder than before, as if the chamber itself sensed what had happened on the surface. Keanu and Livia moved carefully down the narrow staircase, their footsteps echoing through the silent passage. Soldiers watched them from behind, unsure whether they were witnessing protocol or prophecy. Neither Keanu nor Livia spoke. The weight of history pressed around them with every step. When they reached the bottom, the hidden doorway stood exactly as it had the first night, stone smooth edges perfect, untouched by time or collapse. But the moment Keanu stepped forward, the slab shifted again, opening with a heavy sigh of ancient mechanisms waking from deep sleep. The chamber greeted them like an old friend. Soft golden light flowed across the walls, illuminating the smooth metal tables and the suspended diagrams etched into the air. The lantern of time pulsed faintly in the center, as if sensing the return of the two people it had chosen. The hum resonated gently through the floor, neither threatening nor urgent, simply alive. Livia raised her camera with trembling hands. This time, she would capture everything, every symbol, every glowing projection, every artifact scattered across Ventor's workshop. She wanted the world to see what was hidden here. She wanted them to know this wasn't myth or imagination. It was real. Keanu walked straight to the lantern. The moment he placed his hand on its crystalline surface, the sphere awoke in a rush of warm light. Diagrams spun around him, rings of energy images of Rome, pressure maps, geological signatures. But then the projections shifted. New images appeared that neither of them had seen before. Ventor's life. A young Roman engineer working by torchlight, scribbling diagrams that looked impossible for his era. A vision of him studying volcanic tremors near Pompeii, begging officials to evacuate. Scenes of him teaching children how to read symbols of danger. Moments of despair as he watched entire towns ignore warnings until it was too late. The holograms showed him building strange tools with alloys unknown to Rome tools that looked as though they belonged centuries ahead. Livia gasped softly. Ventor wasn't speculating, he was remembering. Then came the images of him constructing the chamber beneath the Colosseum. He worked with precision, creating a sanctuary of knowledge for someone he believed would come long after his own time. He carved symbols into the walls, warnings, instructions, messages for a future he would never see, but hoped could be changed. And then came the final image. Ventor writing in his journal by dim lantern light, the words flowing like a plea across the page. the prophecy of a stranger with a gentle heart, a stranger from beyond his age, a stranger who would finish what he began. The chamber dimmed. The lantern steadied its glow. Keanu looked at Livia. It was time to show the world. Keanu stepped back from the lantern, its glow settling into a steady pulse, as if waiting for the next command. Livia pointed the camera toward him, her breath unsteady but determined. She whispered that the world needed to hear the truth directly from him. He nodded once, not as a celebrity, but as a man carrying a message written across centuries. He took a slow breath and faced the camera. The golden lights of the chamber reflected softly in his eyes. His voice was calm, steady, and sincere. He explained that beneath one of the most iconic structures on Earth lay a chamber built by a forgotten Roman inventor named Aurelius Ventor. He said Ventor had dedicated his life to warning future generations about disasters they would face. He explained that the Lantern of Time was created not for governments or armies, but for humanity itself. As he spoke, the lantern projected images beside him: ancient Rome, volcanic tremors, collapsing cities, and finally the recent rupture that had shaken modern Rome. The visual proof was undeniable. Keanu told viewers that the knowledge preserved here could help scientists understand hidden threats around the world. He urged people to treat these warnings with humility, curiosity, and compassion. He insisted that Ventor's work belonged to everyone, especially those whose lives depended on early preparation. Livia zoomed out as Keanu delivered his final line, a line that echoed through the chamber like a promise. This discovery does not belong to governments. It belongs to humanity. The video was uploaded within minutes. Within hours, it traveled across continents. Within days, it reshaped history. Keanu and Livia stood together as the world awakened to the truth, guided by a message carried forward through 2,000 years of hope, sacrifice, and courage. The world reacted within hours of Keanu's revelation. The video spread across continents faster than any breaking news event that year. Every major network aired it on repeat. Every headline carried the same message. A 2,000-year-old warning had awakened, and the man who delivered it was someone millions already trusted with their hearts. Keanu Reeves had stepped beyond the realm of cinema and into the arena of global history. Some nations responded with awe. Leaders from Japan, Iceland, Chile, and Indonesia publicly thanked him for bringing attention to geological threats that had long been dismissed or underfunded. They praised the courage it took to stand against political pressure and speak directly to the people. Emergency management agencies in seismic zones immediately requested access to Livia's translated excerpts of Ventor's journal. They believed that ancient wisdom combined with modern science could be a breakthrough. Other nations reacted with fear. A few governments released statements demanding that Italy lock down the chamber permanently. They argued that the Lantern of Time, if misunderstood or misused, could destabilize global power. Some claimed it might cause mass panic if other potential disasters were revealed. A handful even accused Keanu of manipulating the footage to create influence on an international scale, though the accusations fell apart as scientists confirmed the collapse matched Ventor's warnings exactly. Italy found itself at the center of a storm. Within a day, the Prime Minister invited Keanu to address Parliament. The nation was shaken, humbled, and searching for direction. Livia received a formal appointment as scientific coordinator for all research related to Ventor's technology. Her quiet determination had become a symbol of integrity to the Italian public. The Vatican issued a statement calling the discovery a rare convergence of human ingenuity and divine providence. They argued that Ventor's desire to save lives reflected moral principles that transcended time. Religious scholars debated endlessly about whether the lantern was a miracle, a message, or something else entirely. Skeptics demanded rational explanations. They argued that Ventor might have been an exceptionally brilliant Roman who predicted seismic cycles through observation alone. Engineers speculated that the chamber was an undocumented marvel of early technology. Conspiracy theorists ignited social media with claims of extraterrestrial origin. Some insisted that the symbols on the walls matched patterns seen in other ancient mysteries. Through it all, Keanu remained calm. He refused to choose a side. He offered no theory about the chamber's origin, no commentary about the lantern's deeper nature. He simply repeated one message whenever questioned. It wasn't built to give us power, it was built to give us responsibility. The world listened, and the world began to change. Italy moved quickly to organize what would become the largest scientific gathering in decades. Within a week, Rome filled with the world's top seismologists, historians, physicists, engineers, linguists, and disaster prevention experts. Hotels overflowed. Conference halls were booked non-stop. Every major institution wanted access to Ventor's chamber to the lantern and to Livia's growing archive of translated pages. Livia found herself leading teams far larger than she had ever imagined. She guided experts through the chamber in controlled groups, explaining the structure, the symbols, and Ventor's vision with a steady voice. Scientists who had spent their lives studying ancient Rome wiped tears from their eyes as they saw the impossible machinery embedded in the walls. Physicists whispered in disbelief that the mechanisms resembled concepts centuries ahead of their time. Others simply stood in silence, humbled by the idea that someone in the ancient world had tried desperately to protect people he would never meet. Keanu joined these visits but stayed at the edge of each crowd. He watched the experts argue, collaborate, marvel, and sometimes fall into stunned silence. He never demanded credit. He never acted as if the discovery belonged to him. His presence was gentle grounding the scientists with a quiet reminder that the work was about saving lives, not fame or power. But not every delegation came with pure intentions. Representatives from several powerful nations arrived under the guise of scientific collaboration, but their questions revealed deeper motives. They asked about potential military applications, about the energy source of the lantern, about whether similar chambers might exist elsewhere in the world. Some wanted the technology duplicated, others wanted it hidden. A few wanted exclusive access, arguing that sharing it would threaten global stability. Italian officials grew nervous. They increased security around the Colosseum. Armed guards patrolled the entrances. Drones monitored the area from above. Rumors spread that intelligence agencies were attempting to infiltrate the site. Livia began receiving anonymous messages urging her to stop publishing translations. Keanu received even more intense pressure. Advisors from multiple governments contacted him privately. They pleaded with him to retract his public statements, to claim uncertainty to diminish the global reaction. Some offered him protection. Others hinted at consequences if he refused. But Keanu did not bend. Instead, he held private meetings with grassroots organizations, educators, and community groups. He explained that Ventor's message was simple. Knowledge saves lives when it is shared, not locked away. He reminded people that early warnings only matter when communities are empowered to act on them. And because of his sincerity, millions began demanding the same from their leaders. As global debates intensified, something unexpected began to happen. Ordinary people, teachers, parents, students, first responders started organizing community workshops inspired by Ventor's principles. They held neighborhood preparedness drills, learned evacuation routes, and taught children basic safety skills. Cities across the world launched public awareness campaigns that mirrored Rome's early efforts. Mayors cited Keanu's warning as proof that waiting for perfection in data was more dangerous than taking early action. Soon, nations began adopting new early warning systems based on a hybrid model created by Livia's research team. The system combined geological monitoring, atmospheric analysis, and Ventor's theories about structural resonance. The early tests showed promising results, detecting microtremors that traditional equipment often missed. Countries prone to earthquakes, volcanic activity, or landslides lined up to implement the technology. International organizations praised Italy for its transparency, turning the chamber into a symbol of global cooperation. Keanu became an unofficial ambassador for disaster preparedness, though he refused any formal title. He spoke only when necessary, and always returned to the same idea that information must serve humanity, not power. Journalists pressed him for interpretations. Was Ventor a prophet, a genius, or something else? Was the lantern ancient technology or evidence of advanced knowledge lost to time? Keanu always offered the same answer, quiet but firm. It didn't matter how extraordinary Ventor was. What mattered was his intention. This isn't about unlocking secrets, Keanu told them. It's about preventing suffering. His humility disarmed critics. His sincerity silenced conspiracy theorists. Even political leaders who once opposed him began echoing his message, realizing that public opinion had shifted. People wanted responsibility, transparency, and preparation. And it all began with a hidden chamber beneath the Colosseum, the mind of a man who lived 2,000 years ago, and another man who chose to listen. History was changing. The world felt it. Because one warning from the past had finally reached the right ears. 1 year later, the world looked different. Not in dramatic, earth-shattering ways, but in small, steady shifts that signaled a deeper change in humanity's relationship with danger, preparedness, and truth. The discovery beneath the Colosseum had rippled outward into every corner of the planet, shaping policy, research culture, and the way ordinary people thought about the future. It had started with a hidden door. Now it had grown into a global movement. The chamber beneath the Colosseum had become one of the most protected and studied heritage sites in the world. International teams worked under strict rotation schedules, each group given time to examine the structures, symbols, and mechanisms that Aurelius Ventor had created 2,000 years earlier. Scholars from dozens of countries lined up for months just to spend a single hour inside the lantern's glow. Engineers tried to understand its construction. Linguists studied its symbols. Physicists tested its harmonics, amazed by its near-living responsiveness. Even after an entire year, the chamber still surprised researchers with patterns no one could fully decode. Italy formed a cultural and scientific consortium that placed the chamber under collective international supervision. No single country could control it. No government could claim ownership. Keanu had insisted on that, and his voice had carried weight far beyond the realm of entertainment. The world agreed that the lantern belonged to everyone because danger belonged to everyone too. Around the planet, cities adopted evacuation plans modeled after Ventor's predictive principles. Communities learned to act early rather than wait for certainty. In Asia, entire coastal regions implemented multi-layered warning systems based on Ventor's resonance theories. In South America, engineers reinforced hillside neighborhoods using designs inspired by the chamber's unusual structural methods. In North America, disaster preparedness became a required subject in schools. For the first time in history, early warning became an expectation rather than an afterthought. Ventor's journal, once forgotten and buried under centuries of dust, became a global bestseller translated into more than 60 languages. It was studied in universities, quoted in speeches, and kept on nightstands by people who found comfort in its message of foresight and compassion. Aurelius Ventor, a man who had died in obscurity, had unexpectedly become one of the most influential voices in the modern world. And at the center of this transformation stood Livia Caruso. The once unknown researcher became a leading figure in disaster science, celebrated for her translations, her leadership, and her courage. She traveled constantly, lecturing at conferences and advising governments, yet she always credited Ventor and Keanu for the movement that now shaped global safety. The world had changed. And in the quiet spaces between these changes, Keanu found his own place within them. Despite the worldwide attention, Keanu never stepped forward to claim recognition. He declined interviews, turned down awards, and ignored every political invitation disguised as gratitude. Foundations tried to name buildings after him. Committees tried to honor him with titles and medals. He politely refused them all. Instead, he quietly redirected every monetary reward, every gesture of financial thanks, into global disaster relief funds. Earthquake recovery programs in Nepal, wildfire survivors in California, flood victims in Southeast Asia. His support went wherever ordinary people were suffering. He wanted no part of fame's spotlight. He wanted only to continue the chain Venter had begun. He kept in contact with Livia, though their lives moved at different speeds. She was constantly in motion, speaking to world leaders about evacuation strategies, working with scientists to decode the final unsolved pages of Ventor's journal, and training young researchers who saw her as a symbol of courage. Whenever she grew overwhelmed, she would call Keanu. He always answered with the same calm reassurance that had once steadied her deep beneath the Colosseum. She told him the world finally understood Ventor's gift. Keanu always replied that the world understood because she had helped them see it. Meanwhile, the chamber itself had become a place of silent pilgrimage. Historians visited for knowledge. Scientists visited for answers. But Keanu visited for something else entirely. He went only in the early mornings when the summer air was cool and the city had not yet awakened. The staff recognized him and allowed him quiet entry. He never announced his visits. He walked through the ancient arches with the humility of someone approaching a sacred space. Inside the chamber, he moved slowly, observing every surface and every soft glow with a quiet reverence. The light from the lantern reflected across the polished walls, shimmering like water across stone. Whenever he stepped closer to it, the harmonics subtly shifted, almost as if acknowledging him. He never tried to interpret the patterns scientists were still trying to decode. He did not need to. He felt their meaning in a different way, not through equations or translations, but through intuition, empathy, and the profound awareness that some inventions were built with the soul, not the mind. He often placed a hand on the pedestal where Ventor's journal had once rested, now replaced with a replica for preservation. In those quiet minutes, he spoke softly, barely above a whisper, as if speaking to someone he might wake. And though there was no answer, he always felt heard. Keanu returned to the Colosseum on a quiet spring morning, long before the tourist lines formed and long before the sun fully cleared the rooftops. Soft light filtered through broken arches, casting gentle gold across the ancient stone. He stood alone at the railing, overlooking the arena floor, breathing slowly, letting the quiet settle around him. This place no longer felt like a monument of violence. It felt like a bridge between ages, between warnings, between two men across 2,000 years who shared the same desire to protect others. He closed his eyes and spoke softly into the stillness, thanking Ventor for his courage and apologizing for the centuries it took for someone to listen. The wind moved lightly through the arches, almost like a reply. Keanu smiled, a small, peaceful smile, feeling no pride, only gratitude. He knew the world was safer now, not because of fame or technology, but because ordinary people had chosen to prepare to care and to act. He walked toward the exit slowly, his hand brushing the ancient stone one last time. He felt connected to something larger than his own life, part of a chain that began long before him and would continue long after. Keanu stood near the highest tier of the Colosseum, looking down at the vast circle of stone that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Dawn crept slowly across the horizon, spilling soft gold over the ancient walls. The city was still half asleep, the streets quiet, the air cool enough to hold the memory of night. In that silence, Keanu let himself breathe, letting the weight of the past year settle gently across his shoulders. He thought of Ventor first, a man who had lived and died in a world of limits, yet had somehow seen beyond them. A man who tried to warn his own people and failed not because he was wrong, but because fear always speaks louder than foresight. Ventor built the chamber out of desperation and hope, leaving behind the lantern as a final attempt to reach someone willing to listen. Keanu imagined him working alone underground, carving messages for people he would never meet, praying that history might someday bend toward survival instead of tragedy. Keanu bowed his head, feeling the gravity of that sacrifice. It humbled him. Ventor had acted without applause, without followers, without certainty. He had built for the future, not for himself. Keanu felt grateful to have been trusted with that kind of legacy, even though he never considered himself worthy of it. Then he thought of the families who had been saved, the parents who packed cars in the middle of the night because they trusted a stranger's warning, the grandparents who evacuated early even when officials told them to wait, the children who slept safely in temporary shelters while the ground above their homes cracked open. Those lives, those breaths, those futures, they mattered more than any monument or mystery. They were the true purpose behind Ventor's message and the lantern's guidance. Keanu also thought about the city itself, a place built from centuries of triumph and heartbreak. Rome had always survived disasters, wars, betrayals, and collapses, but this time felt different. This time, humanity had stepped in before the breaking point. This time, foresight had outweighed denial. For the first time in a long time, history had bent in the opposite direction of tragedy. Keanu felt a deep, quiet pride, not in himself, but in people, in their willingness to act when asked, in their capacity to trust in their instinct to protect one another even when fear whispered otherwise. It gave him hope. It made him believe that maybe Ventor's dream had not been lost after all. As the sun lifted higher, Keanu moved slowly along the ancient walkway, running his fingertips across the cool stone. Each groove and fracture felt like the echo of a long-buried story. He thought about how close the world had come to repeating the mistakes of the past. If the warning had been ignored, if fear had drowned out compassion, the rupture outside Rome could have wiped out entire neighborhoods. The weight of that possibility stayed with him, not as guilt, but as a reminder of how fragile everything could be. He paused at one of the old arches where the light caught the air in a thin golden sheet. It reminded him of the lantern's glow, that steady pulse of warmth that felt alive, almost human. The memory of it stirred something deep inside him. He wondered whether Ventor had stood somewhere like this, looking at the same sunrise, feeling the same mixture of hope and uncertainty. The thought connected them across centuries, binding the present to the past in a way that words could never fully express. Keanu inhaled deeply and let the silence wrap around him. He reflected on the strange destiny that had led him to that hidden door. He hadn't been searching for it that night. He hadn't expected to find anything beyond history and stone. Yet the chamber had opened for him. The lantern had awakened for him. And Ventor's final message had been written for someone with a gentle heart, someone who would act without seeking reward. Keanu still didn't know why it had been him, but he no longer questioned it. Some things were meant to happen because the world needed them too. He thought about Livia and her unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. She had risked her career and her reputation because she believed in what she saw. She fought for Ventor's legacy with the same intensity Ventor once fought to save ancient Rome. Keanu felt grateful for her courage, knowing the world now understood the importance of early warning systems because of her tireless dedication. As he continued around the rim of the Colosseum, he considered the global changes that had followed. Countries had begun adopting new protocols. Cities had updated emergency plans. Scientists had collaborated across continents with unprecedented transparency. It was as though Ventor's voice, silenced for 2,000 years, had finally been heard in every corner of the world. And Keanu knew it wasn't technology alone that made that happen. It was compassion. It was trust. It was the willingness of people to look beyond themselves and see the vulnerable. Standing in the calm morning air, Keanu felt the truth settle inside him. Responsibility did not belong to one man. It belonged to everyone who chose to listen. Keanu walked toward the center of the arena floor, the morning light spilling across the sand in long, gentle lines. He stood still, letting the centuries settle around him. In that quiet moment, he felt the full shape of Ventor's legacy and the path it had carved into his own life. It was never about hidden technology or ancient brilliance. It was about compassion, carried forward from one era to another, passed like a torch to those willing to hold it gently. He placed his hand on a block of weathered stone that had survived emperors, armies, storms, and collapse. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet steady with conviction. He promised that he would continue to listen, continue to act, continue to honor the warning that had saved thousands. The world had changed because one man in the past cared enough to try, and another in the present cared enough to believe. Keanu stepped back and looked up at the rising sun, understanding for the first time that the future was not shaped by power or noise. It was shaped by those who carried kindness into the unknown. And he knew that as long as people chose compassion, the world would always have a chance.